So, and now I'm going to talk about the variations that you can incorporate in your training. And for strength, you have your max strength, which is how much can you lift. Now, it doesn't have to be a 1 rep max as a measurement of your max. I recommend actually using a 5 rep max. It's a little safer. You can do it with a more unconditioned or less strong population. A 5 rep max, you can still test and find out your numbers there. But that would be a max test, or how many can of a certain type of exercise can you do under a certain weight or body weight. So that's max testing. So any sub max work is a percentage of your max. So we incorporate that every week or every other week. We're alternating between sub max and then the next category, which is dynamic. So powerful movement. So if we're squatting, we've tested our max to see what we're capable of. We use a percentage of that when we train sub max on the weights. And then we also want to train dynamically. We'll go lighter, but we want to move powerfully and more reps. So those are some different categories of strength that we incorporate. You can really get into the weeds and start nailing it down on the science of why and the how. And there's tons of studies and tons of resources available on strength and conditioning. But just as an overview, that's kind of how I categorize it and how I incorporate it in our training. And then now talking about metabolic conditioning. So what are some types that you need to think about and incorporate and use in your training? We're going to have aerobic. So that's just a general way of thinking of it is that's going to be our longer duration, our sustained work, sustained run, sustained hike, sustained carrying a load over a distance. That's going to be something you can sustain over a long period of time. That's aerobic. Anaerobic, generally, I'm using that when I talk about sprint work. So going hard for a short period of time that you're not able to sustain beyond either a few seconds, 20, 30 seconds, a minute, like kind of sprint work is how I think about anaerobic. And then there's intervals. So intervals, you can have a determined time of rest. We're going to go hard and then recover. How well can you recover after 2 minutes of work if you rest for a minute? How long can you recover if you're going harder and resting for 2 minutes? So there's tons of variations that we can mix in there. So those are just, again, being really generalized when we're talking about metabolic conditioning. You can get into the science of it on all the metabolic pathways and glycolytic, anaerobic, all the science of it if you really want to dig deep. But in general terms, we're working aerobic, we're doing aerobic work, we're doing anaerobic work, or we're planning and purposeful on our intervals to be able to going hard and then backing off and seeing how we're recovering.